just sounds like science fiction. 125 degrees? You're talking about the surface of Venus. And from the back of the room, someone went, no! Venus is much hotter than that. And I knew, and it wasn't Phil, and I knew that. I was using a comedic device called exaggeration. I should be able to do that, but you know, that's okay. I mean, I'm like that too, so maybe it's justice or something. But I think scientists do have a sense of humor. One time I was performing to a crowd, and it was all kinds of scientists and all sorts of disciplines, and I was talking about Pluto being demoted. Yeah. Sad? Yeah, you think? What about no? No? What do you got against Pluto? Cold, distant, I don't want to be in a platonic relationship. Well, I was just talking about it, and I realized that I knew there was at least one astronomer in the room. And it was this guy, his name's Guy Consolmagno, brother Guy Consolmagno. And he's an astronomer from the Vatican. Yeah. Okay. So I know that is loaded with so much tantalizing information, isn't it? First of all, the Vatican has astronomers, more than one. He's not the only one. He's not just an astronomer. He is the curator of the Vatican meteorite collection. Did you know the Vatican had a meteorite collection? He's the curator. And I always love that. Like, what a business card. Curator of the... For some reason, the only other business card, whenever I think about that, I also think that when I lived in Texas, I would always see this billboard. Between Austin and Houston, there was this billboard that I would always see that I always thought the same thing. This billboard was microsurgical vasectomy reversal. And I was like, wow, I'd like to see that business card. Like, I'm a microsurgeon. If you've had a vasectomy, I can reverse it. It seemed like so much. And it's like, I'm just a comedian, you know? This is like so much. So anyway, he's curator of the Vatican meteorite collection. So I knew he was there, and I'm talking about Pluto, so I go, hey, Guy, brother Guy, he's a Jesuit. And I go, brother Guy, so what did you think about Pluto being demoted? And he said, truthfully, I was on the committee that decided. Yeah, and the whole room sort of laughed, and then they hissed him. And it was the most beautiful moment. It was so funny. And it was one of my favorite moments on stage ever, second to this, of course. And, but because that would never happen like at a comedy club. You know, that would never happen where one of the 12 guys on the International Commission that decides the fate of Pluto is drunk heckling you in the back. I'm not saying he was drunk, and he wasn't really heckling me, I asked him. But afterwards, he came up to me and he goes, I didn't say which way I voted. So he was just going for, he's a very funny guy, and he was just going for the laugh. So that's my example. Scientists do have a sense of humor. How are we doing that? Really? All right. So one time I did this show at a museum, and it went really well. Can you accept that? Just accept that on faith. And then they said, hey, we want you to come back next year and do a whole new show. And could you do a show that has to do with our new exhibit on infectious disease? So I said yes, because I wanted the gig. And then I went home and I was like, what did I just agree to? Like a comedy show about infectious disease? And then I thought, hey, wait a minute. You know what? Bill Cosby could probably do a half hour on having a cold. And then I realized, hey, I'm not Bill Cosby. Very few people are. But eventually, like me and my wife, we did a lot of brainstorming, came up with a lot of stuff. And so, and I'll also preface this, if you've ever seen anything of mine online, you might have heard some of these jokes. So I started talking about viruses, and which are fascinating, because are they even a life form? They don't do everything that we think of as necessary to be defined as a life form, but once they get into a cell, they take over, and it's like a hostile takeover. It's like your cells under new management. It's kind of like going into a Coke factory and having them make Pepsi. Or weirder, like going into a Nike factory and having them make Twinkies or something. And if you think about this stuff too hard, here's the kind of jokes you come up with. A virus walks into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve viruses in this bar. The virus replaces the bartender and says, now we do. That joke is sound. infectious disease walks into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve infectious diseases in this bar. The infectious disease says, well, you're not a very good host. Two bacteria walk into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve bacteria in this bar. The bacteria say, but we work here. We're staff. A room temperature superconductor walks into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve any superconductors in this bar. The room temperature superconductor leaves without putting up any resistance. Schrodinger's cat walks into a bar and doesn't. I want you to come back to America with me. A statistician walks into just your average bar. The bartender says, we don't serve statisticians in this bar. The statistician says, well, you're just mean. The Higgs boson walks into a church in Geneva. The the priest, the guy says, we don't allow your kind in here. The Higgs boson says, but without me, how can you have mass? You can groan, fine. Some helium gas drifts into a bar. The bartender says, we don't serve noble gases in this bar. The helium doesn't react. Well, I want to leave you guys have been awesome, and I want to leave you. So I started kind of with a quotation by Isaac Asimov. I want to leave you with the words of another Isaac Newton, who once said, if I have seen further than others, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants. Isn't that an amazing and humbling thing to hear? And just to think, Isaac Newton, inventor of gravity, universally hailed as perhaps the greatest scientific mind to ever walk the earth, believed in giants. Yeah. Think about that.